Imagine looking out the window of your plane, flying maybe 10,000 feet over the dark, freezing Atlantic Ocean and seeing actual flames shooting out of your
Oh,
engine.
wow. Yeah. Just terrifying.
Right, and your altimeter has like completely failed, which means you have literally no idea how high or low you are in the pitch black.
You're just totally blind at that point.
Exactly. And ice is just accumulating on your wings, radically changing the aerodynamics of the aircraft, just threatening to drop you out of the sky at any second. I mean, most people would be completely paralyzed by panic.
Oh, absolutely. I'd be terrified.
But Amelia Earhart, she just gripped the controls tighter and kept flying. So, welcome to this deep dive. Today, we aren't looking at Earhart just as, a historical icon or reading through some dry list of dates and aviation records.
Right. We're doing something a bit different today.
Yeah, we're looking at a genuinely fascinating document titled What a Boarder Can Learn from Amelia Earhart.
And it is, well, it's just a remarkable piece of writing because it completely reframes how we think about historical figures. The source material uses her life as a literal survival guide.
A survival guide for boarding school students, right?
Exactly. A masterclass for boarding school students who are, away from home, facing this highly rigid, unfamiliar environment for the very first time.
Mm-hmm.
But as we comb through this, it becomes incredibly clear that this is a masterclass for you, the listener, too.
Yeah, for anyone, really.
Right. It's for whenever you are tackling something genuinely difficult, whenever you step into a terrifying blank slate and just have to build your identity from scratch.
It is that incredibly specific feeling of walking into a new job or a new city or a new school, and you look around and realize, wow, I do not know a single soul here.
Yeah, the complete isolation.
Right. There's this massive wave of opportunity, but it's immediately followed by that quiet, persistent question like, am I actually capable of doing this?
And that's the big question, isn't it?
It really is. And to figure out how Earhart answered that question, we have to rewind the clock to, well, long before the flames and the freezing ocean. We have to look at the chaotic environment she was actually born into.
Because that context is just, it's everything. I mean, Amelia Mary Earhart was born in 1897 in Kansas.
Which is a completely different world.
Oh, entirely. This is an era where aviation is in its absolute infancy. Like, the Wright brothers haven't even flown yet.
Wow, right.
Yeah, and when planes do finally come around, they are literally made of wood and canvas. I mean, extraordinarily dangerous machines.
Basically flying kites with engines.
Exactly. And crucially, it was a time when women were absolutely not expected to participate in anything dangerous or, mechanical.
Right. Society had very strict rules back then.
But her immediate family environment was already this sort of micro-rebellion against all of that. She had a very independent, unconventional mother who actually insisted her daughters wear bloomers instead of dresses.
Oh, so they could actually move around.
Exactly. So we could be physically active and curious, completely unconfined by those stiff, suffocating expectations of the late 19th century.
But the document points out that it wasn't exactly a peaceful, idyllic childhood either. There was this dark undercurrent to that independence.
Yeah, that really was.
Her father, Edwin, was a highly intelligent man, but he struggled deeply with alcoholism. And that addiction created a really profound level of financial and emotional unpredictability for the whole family.
Right, they were constantly on the move.
Yeah, they were constantly uprooted to chase jobs or, flee debts. They moved across cities like Kansas City, Des Moines, St. Paul, Chicago. I mean, to give you a sense of just how much instability we are talking about here, Amelia attended 6 different high schools in a span of just 4 years.
6 high schools in 4 years.
Yeah.
That is just, it's a lot.
Okay, let's unpack this, because that detail right there, I think, is the key to her entire psychological makeup, attending 6 different high schools in 4 years.
It's hard to even imagine.
It really is. If you think about what that actually means for a teenager, it is brutal. You lose your friend group every few months. You lose your established reputation.
Right, you're always the new kid.
Exactly. The teachers don't know if you're the smart kid, the quiet kid, the troublemaker. You are forced to rebuild your identity from scratch over and over again. And that chaotic background perfectly mirrors the feeling of being a new boarding student.
Oh, totally.
Or really anyone dropped into a highly fluid environment. You don't have the luxury of standing on solid ground. You have to figure out how to ground yourself internally when the world underneath you just keeps shifting.
That is such a brilliant way to frame it.
Yeah.
Yeah, she had to become her own anchor, because before she ever took to the skies to prove herself to the rest of the globe, she first had to prove to herself that she wouldn't just be swept away by her circumstances.
Right.
And we see that instinct, that absolute demand to test the limits of gravity and reality from a really young age. I mean, she was exceptionally adventurous.
She collected insects and played rough
Well,
sports, right?
she did. But the most telling anecdote from her childhood, it happened when she was just 7 years old. She and her sister actually managed to build a homemade wooden roller coaster in their garden.
Wait, really? On roller
A
coaster?
literal roller coaster. They dragged wood around, built a ramp off the roof of a tool shed, and just launched themselves down it in this little wooden cart.
That is incredibly dangerous.
Oh, it was. And after one particularly dramatic, violent crash that, tore her dress and bruised her all up, a 7-year-old Amelia didn't cry or run inside.
What did she do?
She simply looked at her sister and declared that the brief moment before the crash had felt, quote, just like flying.
Wow. I can picture that so clearly, just like a wooden cart splintering in the backyard, and she is just brushing the dirt off her knees, completely obsessed with the sensation of airtime.
Exactly. She was hooked.
But, building a backyard roller coaster is really just childhood imagination. The source document highlights a different practice from her childhood that moves away from just playing around and actually steps into strategic thinking. It was a scrapbook.
Yes, the scrapbook. This is perhaps the most illuminating detail of her early psychological development.
How so?
Well, at the time, if a young girl kept a scrapbook, mainstream media and society offered up a very specific menu of role models. You would cut out pictures of society ladies, maybe actresses, or wives of prominent politicians.
Right, the standard expectations for women then.
Exactly. But instead, Earhart kept a scrapbook completely filled with newspaper clippings of women succeeding in heavily male-dominated fields.
Really? Like what kinds of fields?
We are talking about women in film direction, corporate law, advertising, mechanical engineering, management. And she was compiling this at the age of 10, 11, 12.
That is so young to be thinking about that.
Right. Long before she ever touched the controls of an aeroplane, she was studying these women.
I look at that and it feels like she was compiling a legal evidence file against society's rules, like a mental mood board of rebellion.
That's a great way to put it.
But wait, I want to look closely at this. She wasn't even collecting clippings about pilots. She's looking at lawyers and mechanical engineers. So why is this specific practice presented as such a crucial first step in her blueprint for success?
Well, what's fascinating here is that she wasn't looking for a literal roadmap to become a pilot yet.
Because they didn't really exist?
Exactly. Female pilots essentially didn't exist for her to cut out of a newspaper.
Yeah.
So she was abstracting the problem. She was building a mental model of possibility.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, she was conducting her own independent audit of reality rather than just accepting the unexamined assumptions of her immediate environment.
Which was telling her to just be quiet and wear a nice dress.
Precisely. The world around her loudly proclaimed, women do not do these things. But she looked closely, did the research, and said, actually, here is the empirical evidence that they quietly already are. And for a boarding school student, or for you listening right now, this is a highly actionable strategy. It is the active, deliberate practice of seeking out people who look like you or come from your background, who are doing what you want to do.
Right. You can't just wait for someone to hand you a permission slip.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You cannot simply accept the default menu of options that your immediate environment slides across the table. You have to actively hunt for the evidence that your ambition is achievable, even if you have to look in like adjacent fields to find the mechanics of how a barrier is broken.
You have to expand your imagination before you can expand your reality. You really have to gather the proof that the ceiling actually has cracks in it.
Beautifully said.
But building a mental model of possibility only solves the problem of imagination, right? It doesn't solve the problem of physics or, the problem of economics.
Right, unfortunately.
Because the world doesn't care about your scrapbook. It cares about your resources and your actual skills. And that is where her strategy had to shift from just observation to brutal, unglamorous execution.
The hard work.
Exactly. How do you cross the gap from daydreaming about an ambition to actually physically doing it?
Well, you have to pay the price of admission. And for Earhart, the path to paying that price was not a straight cinematic line at all.
She bounced around a bit, right?
She did. After high school, she changed direction multiple times. She tried nursing wounded soldiers during the First World War. She enrolled in a pre-med program at Columbia University and then dropped out. She tried social work in Boston.
She was wandering.
Yeah, wandering, testing different waters, just trying to find the physical reality that matched that mental model she had built in her scrapbook. It wasn't until December of 1920, when she was 23 years old, that the wandering finally stopped.
What happened in 1920?
She attended an air show in Long Beach, California, and her father paid $10 for her to take a 10-minute ride in an airplane.
10 minutes. That is literally all it took.
Just 10 minutes.
And she described that exact moment with such intense, almost frightening clarity. I remember she wrote, "As soon as I left the ground, I knew I myself had to fly."
The search was permanently over.
But again, aviation in the 1920s was a rich person's game, right? It was a playground for wealthy daredevils. And given her family's constant financial instability, she did not have access to those kinds of resources.
Not at all. I mean, flying lessons in 1921 were exorbitantly expensive. They cost $1,000, which, I mean, that was my massive sum at the time.
Oh, absolutely.
So she did what was necessary. She got to work in the most mundane, repetitive jobs imaginable. She worked as a filing clerk for a local telephone company. She worked as a photographer.
I read she even drove a gravel truck.
She did. She drove a sand and gravel truck. She lived incredibly frugally, saving every single dollar she could spare. She eventually gathered enough to pay for lessons from Anita Snook, who was a pioneer herself as one of the very few female flight instructors in the country.
That's amazing.
And Earhart didn't stop there. She kept grinding at those mundane jobs until she saved enough to buy her very own aeroplane.
The Canary.
Yes, a bright yellow, second-hand Kinner Airster biplane that she affectionately called the Canary. And in 1922, before she even had her official international pilot's license, she took the Canary up and set a women's altitude record of 14,000 feet.
Here's where it gets really interesting to me, because it changes the psychology of the achievement entirely.
On you mean?
Well, we have this terrible habit of romanticizing the destiny of historical figures. Like, we look back at Amelia Earhart in her leather jacket and goggles and think, well, of course she flew. She was meant to fly.
Right, like it was just fated to happen.
Exactly. We strip away the friction and make it seem effortless, but she literally had to sit in a chaotic, noisy telephone switchboard room, connecting calls for other people all day, just to afford one single hour in the silence of the sky.
This is a striking image.
The brutal contrast between her daily reality and her ambition is just staggering.
Yeah.
So I have to ask, does that kind of financial and emotional struggle actually change the nature of the capability she is building?
It doesn't just change it. It is the absolute foundation of it.
Yeah.
That is the difference between rented confidence and owned competence.
Ooh, rented confidence versus owned competence. I like that.
Yeah, because the investment becomes the capability.
Mhm.
When you choose something at a massive personal cost, like driving a gravel truck to buy airplane fuel, the resilience you develop doesn't just suddenly emerge when you finally take off.
Right.
It emerges from the thousands of hours of sustained, unglamorous effort required to simply get to the starting line. Think about a boarding student who actively chooses to wake up at 5 in the morning for a training session when the room is freezing and the alarm is just, completely unwelcome.
Or the student studying advanced calculus during a free period instead of hanging out with friends.
Exactly. That investment, made consistently in the dark, builds a permanent, unbreakable relationship with your own capability. It cannot be purchased by wealthy parents. It cannot be shortcut. You own it entirely because you suffered for it.
But, the real test of character isn't just how you handle the struggle. I think the ultimate test is how you handle the shortcut when life unexpectedly hands one to you.
Oh, absolutely.
Because sometimes the world actually offers to celebrate you for a capability you haven't fully earned yet. And this is where the Amelia Earhart blueprint takes a turn that I think is deeply relatable, even if the listener has zero interest in aviation.
This brings us directly to the 1928 transatlantic flight, which is arguably the most psychologically complex moment of her entire life.
Let's lay out what happened. So in 1928, the world is obsessed with ocean crossings, and Earhart is offered the chance to become the first woman to cross the Atlantic by aeroplane.
Which is a huge deal.
Huge. So she accepts, and she boards a plane named the Friendship, which is piloted by two men, Wilmer Stoltz and Lou Gordon. They fly from Newfoundland, Canada, and successfully land in Wales.
But there's a catch.
A big catch. Now, before the flight, she had been promised stick time. She was told she would actually get to physically fly the plane during the crossing. But the weather was incredibly dangerous, they're flying on instruments, and she never got the chance.
The men flew the entire way.
Exactly. So she lands on the other side of the Atlantic, and the reaction is explosive. She receives a literal hero's welcome, international celebrity status overnight.
Ticker tape parades in New York.
Yes, the President of the United States receives her. The whole world is cheering for her as a pioneer. But internally, she was miserable. She famously told the press that she felt, quote, like a sack of potatoes.
The honesty in that quote is startling. She felt like baggage.
Right.
The global fame felt entirely unearned because the celebration was a proxy for genuine achievement. She had physically crossed the ocean, yes, but she had been a passenger, and she wanted to be a pilot.
She didn't want to just be along for the ride.
Exactly. I mean, she possessed the scrapbook of mechanical engineers, she had driven the gravel truck, she had bought the Canary, and yet she simply could not accept the world's deafening applause for something she knew, deep in her bones, she had not truly accomplished on her own merits.
So what does this all mean? To me, this feels exactly like getting an A on a massive group project when you know you didn't contribute a single paragraph to the final paper.
Oh, that's a perfect analogy.
Right. The grade on the transcript is real. Your parents are incredibly proud. The teacher smiles at you and tells you, great job. But the foundation underneath that A is completely hollow.
Because you know you don't actually understand the material.
Exactly. If someone asked you to explain the thesis, you would freeze. But honestly, human nature dictates that most people would just take the A and walk away.
Most people definitely would.
Most people would just sign the endorsement deals, enjoy the fame from 1928, and live comfortably for the rest of their lives. Why couldn't she just let it be? Why risk her life to go back into the sky?
Because of the psychological toll of hollow victory. And that brings us to what happened 4 years later. In May 1932, she took off again.
This time alone?
Yes, this time from Newfoundland, heading for Paris. But this time, she was strapped into the cockpit of a bright red Lockheed Vega. And she was completely, utterly alone.
And the flight was brutal.
The journey she willingly subjected herself to was the stuff of nightmares. It lasted 14 hours and 56 minutes. She flew into massive electrical storms that tossed the plane around like a toy.
Wow.
Her windshield and wings became thickly coated in ice, weighing the plane down. Her altimeter completely failed. And as we mentioned at the start of this deep dive, at one point while flying through heavy cloud cover in the dead of night, she looked out the window and saw flames literally shooting from the exhaust manifold of the engine.
I can't even fathom that level of stress.
It's unbelievable. And she couldn't make it to Paris. She had to drop the plane down into a quiet, sloping farmer's field in Londonderry, Northern Ireland. She climbed out of the cockpit, scaring the local cows, having just become the first woman to fly the Atlantic solo.
And only the second person in history to do it after Charles Lindbergh.
Exactly.
And she didn't do it for the ticker tape parade this time. The parade was just a side effect.
Exactly the opposite of 1928. She wrote about her internal motivations for the 1932 flight with total clarity. She said it was, quote, a self-justification proving to me and to anyone else interested that a woman with adequate experience could do it.
Self-justification, that's powerful.
It really is. It wasn't about ambition or fame. It was the desperate, burning need to prove to herself that the reception she got in 1928 was actually deserved. This connects so deeply to the core message for the boarding school student and really to anyone listening who is navigating their career. It highlights the profound difference between performing for external recognition and holding yourself to the brutal standard of your own honest capability. The ultimate lesson from the Lockheed Vega is, accept no proxy for genuine achievement.
Accept no proxy.
Right. Do not let the world tell you that you are capable if you haven't proven it to yourself in the dark.
You have to be able to look yourself in the mirror without flinching. So, let's trace the blueprint so far. You have imagined the impossible, using your scrapbook to audit reality.
Yep.
You have put in the grueling, unglamorous work at the telephone company to pay the price of admission, and you have flown through the icy storm, navigating a burning engine, to genuinely earn your achievement.
You've done it all.
The logical assumption is that the story culminates there. You reach the mountaintop, you stand in the farmer's field in Ireland and soak in the individual glory. But for Earhart, the blueprint did not end with her own records.
Far from it. Once she broke the ceiling, she immediately turned around and started building infrastructure for others.
Like the 99s.
Exactly. In 1929, right after the passenger flight, she helped found an organization called the 99s. It was the very first international organization of licensed women pilots, named simply for the 99 charter members who came together at that first meeting.
She was the first president, right?
She was elected as its first president. And while she continued to push her own limits,
Hmm.
I mean, between 1930 and 1935, she set 7 different women's speed and distance records. She also took an incredibly unique appointment to the faculty of Purdue University.
As an aviation professor?
No, actually. She didn't go there to teach aerodynamics or flight mechanics. She went there as a career counselor for women.
Okay. There is a massive contradiction in human nature here that I want to push back on. History is full of pioneers, and, we call it the pioneer's paradox.
Right.
Most pioneers fight so incredibly hard through so much prejudice, systemic doubt, and lack of funding to break a barrier. And once they finally break it, they naturally relish being the first or the only in the room.
Because it makes them special.
Exactly. Being the only woman in the sky made Earhart incredibly special. It made her a global icon. So why does she actively spend her precious energy, her time, and her political capital organizing other women and counseling them on how to enter male-dominated fields?
You're wondering if that hurt her brand.
Doesn't that risk diluting her own unique celebrity status? Like, if thousands of women are flying planes, Amelia Earhart isn't a magical unicorn anymore.
Well, if we connect this to the bigger picture, Earhart fundamentally understood that a ceiling broken once can simply be repaired by society.
Oh, wow.
But a ceiling broken 99 times stays shattered forever.
Right.
She viewed her individual achievements not as an end goal, but as a tool to change the broader culture.
So it was bigger than her.
Exactly. The 99s were not just a social club for women who liked airplanes. They were a collective assertion of power. They were institutional proof that women flying should be a normal, mundane, everyday reality, not just a token curiosity or a circus act at an air show.
That makes total sense.
She understood that her individual fame would only carry lasting historical meaning if she used it to hold the ladder for the next generation.
Which is such a powerful lesson.
For the listener, or the boarding student who is excelling in their new environment, this is the ultimate challenge. It is about leveraging your newly earned advantages, whether you are suddenly ahead academically, thriving socially, or dominating in the corporate hierarchy, to actively make space for others.
Instead of just pulling the ladder up behind you.
Right, rather than aggressively hoarding your success to protect your own ego. The student who masters a difficult subject and then tutors a struggling peer is executing the exact same principle Earhart used when she founded the 99s.
She was a systemic architect, not just a thrill seeker setting records. Now, as we bring this deep dive to a close, we do have to acknowledge the tragic, unresolved end of her physical journey.
Yes, we do.
On July 2, 1937, while attempting a monumental challenge to become the first woman to circumnavigate the globe by air, Amelia Earhart and her navigator Fred Noonan disappeared over the vast expanse of the Pacific Ocean.
She was only 39 years old.
So young, and despite massive search efforts, they were never found. But the source document makes this beautifully, powerfully clear. That tragic ending in the Pacific does not diminish the blueprint she left behind on land.
If anything, it cements it.
It really does. Her life teaches you to approach terrifying new environments with the curiosity of a child building a wooden roller coaster. It teaches you to audit reality rather than accepting society's limits. It demands that you hold yourself to the standard of genuine capability, refusing the hollow praise of being a passenger.
And finally, it asks you to use whatever heights you reach to make space for the people coming up through the clouds behind you.
It's an incredible legacy.
It is a complete philosophy of resilience. And I want to speak directly to you, the listener, as you navigate whatever uncertainties in front of you right now.
Yeah, whatever that might be.
Think about your own current runway. Whether that runway is boarding school, a daunting career transition, a creative project you are terrified to launch, or just a complex personal challenge.
Everyone has a runway.
Exactly. Earhart deeply understood the psychological toll of pushing out into the unknown. She summarized the entire transaction of growth in one brilliant, haunting quote. She said, "Courage is the price that life exacts for granting peace."
Courage is the price that life exacts for granting peace.
Right. If you want true internal peace with yourself,
Yeah.
you cannot buy it and you cannot fake it. You have to pay the price of courage. You have to put your hands on the controls and fly the plane yourself.
That is the ultimate takeaway, because Earhart realized that unearned praise being celebrated while someone else does the flying actually robs you of your own peace.
It really does.
The applause is loud, but the internal silence is deafening because you know it's fake. So take a hard look at your own life right now. Look at your job, your education, your relationships. Are you coasting on a 1928 passenger flight in some area of your life? A very uncomfortable question to ask yourself.
It is. Are you letting someone else do the heavy lifting while you comfortably absorb the credit and the title? And if the honest answer is yes, what is the icy, terrifying storm you need to willingly fly into tomorrow so you can finally prove your worth to yourself?